It was not.
So I almost wonder too if this is going to wind up being the actual structure of the book.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so interesting.
If our analysis is going to happen along these things. But so you just pointed out, I'll back up really quickly because we need to upload this somewhere, but we're mapping out the retreat that we want to do, the 1 day Zoom retreat that we want to do. And we were thinking about the 3 different sessions we wanted to do based on these components of breaking down our reluctance to writing. And it's basically going across the mind, body, spirit, the mind being in the middle here, the whole Jungian thing that StoryGrid's geeking out over right now, that we also geeked out over. But that wasn't our intention. It just happened to be that way, I think, because explanations of reality, hence the middle thing. So anyway, we came up with these 3 blocks of how we want to move through this 1 day session. And it also is really tied to the book that we're structuring. And what we found is that there's these levels of focus. Is that what you would call it?
Obsession.
It's like obsession.
Right.
This isn't the self-love part of the Every Story is a Love Story. This is the obsession.
Right. This is the, oh my God, that is so accurate, right? Oh my God, that is so accurate. Yes. Where you just want to you just want to get off on your execution, right? You just want to I just want my book to be out into the world. I just want to have readers. I want to have reviews. I want to make $1 gazillion. It's just very I need to write 1,667 words every day for 365 days a year, or I am absolutely a failure. This is not sustainable. This is not a sustainable relationship. You are going to chap your lips and your face, and you're going to get a UTI, and it's going to be bad news. Just stop it. Just stop. Okay.
Oh my God. This is what happens when we start recording midday.
I know it's late. Yes, it is.
Okay.
But it doesn't. It's no less true though.
It's not wrong.
Not wrong.
Not
it's
wrong.
But not.
You know what's
wrong.
hilarious though? If you I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'm drafting with a female author, and the metaphor comes back to sex.
Right.
A lot.
It's a really primal way to understand something. And it makes complete sense, right? Yeah.
That wasn't why I said we should start recording, but I'm so glad it happened.
So glad I was here for this.
So we have this drafty, messy first picture of how our brains were thinking about this thing as we talked about it.
Yes.
But what's happening is what we just noticed that I wanted to capture is these are separate ways of thinking about your relationship to writing if you go vertically. And then if you go horizontally through the purple, it's ways of thinking about your story and how you bring it to the page. And then through the orange is ways of thinking about yourself as you and as a writer. And so those things will all be explained more in depth later. But the thing that I noticed is that sometimes, so say we're in this reluctant space in the top right. Is that what it is? The top right. Hey, you have a pointer.
Right? Isn't this so fun? Okay. So yes.
So snazzy. So say we're up here. We really want word counts, right? Our reluctant drafter authors want word counts. Kim wants word counts.
I do.
I want to have executed, but honestly, I want to make a drafting method that will give you guys word counts, as an editor, and that's why I came up with the 5-minute outline. I want to get you writing. So that's where we spend a lot of our energy is going but I want word counts though, and that's where we feel our reluctance is I don't have word counts though. I don't know how to execute. So let me try these 7,000 different drafting methods to figure it out. So on these top line ones, the purple, these very first ones, word counts, learning craft, and heart of story are the hardest thing to actually get to. It's easier on the reluctant side. It's easier to try a new drafting method and to learn about a new drafting method than it is to actually execute on it, than it is to actually get the word counts that you thought you wanted or needed. So they're like from bottom to top is like easiest to hardest. And then on the orange level, it's reversed. It's easiest to hyper focus on performance and playing the role of writer, where you're like, I'm getting up every morning now and I'm sitting my butt in the chair and I'm writing and saying that, whether or not you're doing it, like tomorrow, I'm going to do it tomorrow, or I'm working on it in my headspace. Like you find ways of talking about it where
I'm sitting at coffee shops with my super cool headphones on. And you know what I was thinking about this is this performance piece in the genre of performance, right? The values are respect and shame. So like you want to do the outward thing that looks respectful, but inside you're dealing with so much shame. Or if you don't execute or get your word counts, well, guess what's affected? Like you feel like shit, right? Like you feel shamey or whatever. And so anyway, I was just, that's a good thing really too. Important.
Because it's not even the action of the thing in this block, because it's about you, yourself. This is self. Self. So it's not even necessarily the action of the thing, but like the reasoning for the thing. So I'm not performing, I am ashamed. I am not writing enough, I am ashamed. I did write, I am a writer. Like therefore respect me, look at my word counts. And if you respect me, then I respect me. So you're totally right. It's the living, when we're playing writer, it's because we want respect and shame to be our measuring stick of whether or not we're doing the thing. And that's especially true, which is what I'm going to get to in a second. That's especially true if we don't have the word counts to prove it. If we're not getting what we want, then we're like, I have this. I don't know if my screen is showing on there.
Still working on my novel. Nice.
This is my keychain, right? Like it was a very sweet gift from a friend. But like this keychain is a thing that people can buy so that you can carry around, I'm a writer. Like,
yep.
Right? Because that's an easier thing. So the harder thing on that is personality, which we have a whole session on personality typing tools that help you understand yourself better.
What's useful and where to focus, because there's so much information out there, like where to really like just start to pay attention to those things, that how it can actually be useful to you to start doing some of this stuff that you want to be doing. Like there's tools in there that are good, and what works for me does not work for Brandon and vice versa, right?
So as a tool, that's really useful. But if it becomes a blame thing because we're not getting what we want, then it's like, I am ashamed because I have no word count because I am bad. And then we start getting into personality typing stuff, and you're like, well, I'm an Enneagram 5, so I'm really about competence, and I'm just going to learn everything about it. I'm not really an executor anyway. And you find ways to talk about yourself that are either total bullshit or and like not necessarily unkind, but also like a complete excuse, or you start talking about yourself in ways that are really, really unkind. Like you just internalize it all.
Right.
It's not okay. Right. But that's like the next layer that we go down, and what we don't let ourselves do though is give ourselves permission or acknowledge that we haven't given ourselves permission to write in the way that we need to write, or to tell our stories, as we're getting into with Reluctant Drafter, to tell our stories in the way we need to tell our stories, whether or not that includes word counts. We don't do that thing.
Right.
No. So what happens is we get in these spiral loops where we just bounce up and down. We go from word counts are a problem to I'm going to try and execute better to I'm going to try a new drafting method to, oh, I'm ashamed. Please buy me this tag that I can announce to everyone that I'm a writer, to, oh, this is my personality. And then we hit the permission bit and we go, not even looking at that. And we bounce back up.
Right.
And find another way to go through performance and through drafting methods and execution. And then we hit the word count wall that we're not performing at and go back down. And we start bouncing around, which you see in like a TISI loop for me in Myers-Briggs. It's like you get in these loops where you're not pulling on other strengths that you have. So you just it feeds in this nasty cycle, bouncing back and forth. And I'm totally picturing this little laser pointer thing you have, like Pong.
Yep.
You just start bouncing on the walls of the things that you don't want to deal with. So then
so hilarious.
When that gets exhausting, we bounce to another wall, and you might go diagonal, right? Like you could go down from word counts to, well, I'm going to learn craft for a while. I want to learn story structure, really get story structure. Oh, I see some structure that I'm really inspired by. I'm going to go down to pink. And then like you bounce around, but you always hit these walls of the heart of you and the meaning of the story and the permission to tell it and the permission to tell the actual heart of the story, and learning craft, not just what someone else will approve of, but the actual craft of being a storytelling artist. And then changing your relationship with your word counts. Those outside boundaries are too much, and we don't even go through them. We just bounce right off and go somewhere else. And then I want you to talk about this thing, because you saw, this is overarchingly a meaning thing. This is a finding meaning in who you are as a writer, is the like genre term for it. But what's happening in these vertical blocks is ignorance to wisdom. And I want you to talk about the thing, and then I'm going to follow it up by geeking out about it more, because that's what I wanted you to record, because it's amazing.
Okay. So so what I noticed is, you were talking about, right, how we sort of like bounce around and we're ponging around. And it was the idea that like within each of these squares, right, within each of these, we have we're going from ignorance to wisdom, right, within them. So we're like, oh, I don't know what I don't know. And then I learn maybe just enough to be dangerous, or I go through cognitive dissonance, or I'm like, oh, I'm really uncomfortable with that idea. And at some point you ultimately learn something and you know how to apply it. But what will happen, because we are really uncomfortable with not knowing things and all of that, I think what happens is within each of these squares, we'll get to a certain point of like, we'll go from ignorance to, up to, well, and in fact, a lot of us are starting out at that, the negation of the negation, right? We're like, we think we know. I think I know what it is, right? Like, oh, I did NaNoWriMo before. I know all about execution. Like it worked one time and I like killed my wrists and then I never did it again. So, whatever, like it's this idea.
I can do it. And you say that because you've said that a lot. I did it in Nano. I drafted according to plan in Nano.
I got one book out. It took 15 years and you had to like yank me over the finish line, but I did that thing.
But I did it in Nano specifically. So then you were like, I know I can do it. I know I can get the words out. So yeah, it's totally ignorance masked, as though
ignorance masked as wisdom. Yeah. As knowledge or whatever. So what I'm thinking is that, you get to a certain level of like growth or like understanding, and then you're like, ugh. And so then you like bounce over, and then it's like whenever you go to the next one. So like if I'm like working on these word counts and I'm like learning things about permission or performance, and I'm like, ugh, this is hard. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to start back at ignorance. This is exactly what I did. I went and I had to learn craft and structure, because I'm like, I don't actually know how to get through the middle. So I start back at ignorance here, and you get to a certain level and you think, okay, I should know some stuff, but you don't get all the way to wisdom. Like we're impatient, so we're not getting all the way to wisdom. And in fact, I would say it's probably not even possible to get to wisdom in one thing,
in one block. Nope.
It's like the whole thing, they're all connected and related, and in order to really have wisdom, you really do need to have this, understand meaning and permission and the heart of you and all of those things.
That's the thing.
So it just was interesting just to imagine us sort of ping-ponging around. I'm like, oh, I'm getting some knowledge here, and I'm going to ping over here. I'm going to get some knowledge here. And then like, ugh, and then I'm going to go down here and I'm going to grow a little bit, and then ping, ping, ping. And then we're just constantly fighting our own ignorance and our own resistance to being wrong. And in sort of the Buddhist tradition, right, the idea of like, we are suffering because ignorance, avoidance, and my attachment to desire. I am attached to my desire to have more word count than I have. I am attached to my definition of success, that is, having movies on Netflix. I'm very attached to that definition, and it has not happened, and it's very shameful. No, I'm just kidding. But like, until you
are not kidding. You are not kidding though, because in your darkest moments, repeatedly, you go through that where you're like, I'm never going to get there.
It's never going to happen. Yeah.
I literally just read in, I think it was in Tiny Beautiful Things. I think that's what I sent you the picture of. I like opened up the book, And it was in, we're just going to set the tone for all of this. It was in the chapter called Write Like a Motherfucker.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's in the book Tiny Beautiful Things.
It's in Tiny Beautiful Things. It's epic. But I flipped it open. I wasn't even like looking for it. I just opened it up and I flipped open to Write Like a Motherfucker. And she was like basically telling this person that wrote into her to get to the heart of her story.
Yeah.
And the thing that she told her was like, how dare you? Like, you say that you're like humble and that you don't know and you don't know what you're doing, but like you have a lot of audacity. I'm paraphrasing. You have a lot of audacity saying, why haven't I made it yet? Why don't I have the awards? Why don't I have it? When everybody else who's succeeded, like the vast majority are like 10 and 15 years older than you with so much more work behind. Like, why do you think you get to be a prodigy? And like,
right. And
how dare you?
That's
the mask.
Ignorance masked, right? Ignorance masked as knowledge, and thinking that you know more than you know, or being attached to something and not recognizing, and also, you know, talk about just other limiting beliefs like scarcity versus abundance, like versus, you know, all of those things. And so then at some point though, right, at some point, you know, you make a friend with a girl named Brandon, and at some point you tip past one of your, you know, ignorance, cognitive dissonance. You get past that cognitive dissonance into like some knowledge, and you have a revelatory, oh, I see the truth of me. Like, oh, that's how this whole thing started, where I was like, I was trying to understand my own story. And then it was like, well, I have to understand myself. I have to understand the way I'm even approaching my writing process. And I had to really acknowledge shame. I had to acknowledge my definitions of success. And I had to go through all of these things. I still haven't done this one yet, but we're working our way back.
So that's the thing. So this is the thing. This is what's so wild about all of this, is if we're starting at the entry level, if the entry level is ignorance masked, and we're just peeling off the mask, the first thing we're doing is peeling off the mask to go, have you defined success? So like, what do you mean you want to be a writer? What does that mean? And like, oh, peel off the mask. Okay. And so you're really only getting to, I always throw disillusionment in there with, I know it's not on the scale, I guess, of ignorance to wisdom necessarily, but
it's all
cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance. I think we spend a lot of time in that middle line is a lot of cognitive dissonance and knowledge. It's like this, like, oh, I'm learning things and it's like shaking me up a little, and it's and that feels like a big jump, right? But it feels, we get the, I don't know if this is real, but it feels real. We get the dopamine hit of having moved up the line.
Right.
And so we're like, I did a thing that was amazing. And it feels really good for a little while. And then when it hurts, when you have to go from knowledge to wisdom, or when you have to go from like, you know, the cognitive dissonance to knowledge to wisdom, like to really know a thing, to really know a thing is different than being introduced to it and like being
to even like, understanding a thing versus
kind of assaulted by it.
Applying a thing, knowing when to use something and when not to use something, like, right? Like there's the nuance of those things, that sweet spot, that narrow road, that all of that, the gray, right? Of the like, what, anyway, just that in all things. That's wisdom.
So
right?
It's wisdom, and wisdom always comes with the with that turn of the dark side, the shadow. You know, so we have the Masterwork Guide for the tipping point, which is just to show you one angle of how big idea nonfiction might look and to name what was happening in the tipping point. But he had, you know, the tipping points happen in these scenarios, and this is what it looks like, and here's how we know they happen, and all these different examples. Then he's like, by the way, sometimes it happens with bad stuff too. So like, it's not all sunshine and roses. And you see that in a lot of books. Like it's a convention to the point that you can see it in the table of contents. It's not even really buried in a lot of, like, Atomic Habits is like the downside of habits. Like it's got to be there. There's this turn where you go, and by the way, there's this other side of it too. And that's the attempt to bring in wisdom, to go, it's the thing that you wanted, via the all of this stuff that you needed to understand to be able to get what you wanted. And also there's cautions, and there's not everything is sunshine and roses on the other side. And that part is wisdom. When you go, it's not just having, it's being. It's not just, whatever. It's more than just the surface level thing. And so that's wisdom. So what's happening here, I think what we're seeing in this Pong game of trying to be a writer is that we can peel off our mask in small ways. We can admit that we're ignorant in small ways enough to go get the dopamine hit of new knowledge, right? Like newly diagnosed ADHD, like long time haver, first time acknowledger, like long time listener, first time caller with ADHD. Going and learning new things feels amazing. Actually becoming an expert in that thing feels boring as shit. And I don't want to stick around for that. And so that is not just like, like me or, everybody else nodding along with this. It's just uncomfortable to have to start facing how much you don't know. And so, so we're peeling off our mask and admitting that we're ignorant just enough to get some knowledge and feel good. But what we're not doing is peeling off the global mask of ignorance, masked as knowledge and whatever, because we've done all the learning. We've learned so much. How many conferences have we gone to? How many challenges have we executed? How many, NYC Midnight and NaNoWriMo and StoryGrid and all of these things, we collect them, like, and clients and all of these things that we collect as badges of honor to say we've learned the things, make us go, so I'm not all the way down at the negation of the negation. There's no way. I spent way too much time at knowledge to be down there.
You're like, I think that's a slippery slope, because if you think you know, then you might actually be, right?
It's like the biggest mask of all, and that's the hardest one to pull off.
And I think what's so interesting is that then it brings us back to like the ultimate like thing that we really need to figure out is really getting back to you as an individual, right? We know that our big turn in the Reluctant Drafter book is like, okay, cool. You could go write all the words, perform all the things, get all the success, learn all the craft, tell the most amazing stories, or not. Like, it doesn't actually matter, because you are a human being and you have story in you. Like, it's in your DNA. Your ancestors did this thing. They've passed it on to you, whether you consciously acknowledge that or not. You have a right and an inheritance to storytelling it's a thing your brain does. It's the thing our brain does, right? It is.
You can't not
do it. And you just probably tell yourself cautionary tales more often about yourself, but that doesn't mean it's not storytelling. Like, and so I think until we can really get back to like, not only that you have what it takes because you are a human being with this information, you have what we say like in the talent code stuff, it talks about like ignition, right? You have a desire that you want a thing, and you have specific experiences that are subjective to you, that when you share them with your own specificity will be universally meaningful to other people. So like getting to the heart of those things of like, what is it about you and your experiences, or just even your like, doesn't even have to be like autobiographical, but just like the way that you see the world, what you think is annoying, what you think is interesting, what you think is confusing or crazy or whatever, like any of these sort of like blips of inspiration, when you make a specific connection because of who you are, that is the thing. And so if we can do this thing, if we can get to wisdom about ourselves and about this thing, then that I think is the key to tipping into wisdom in any of these other areas. I don't think it's possible. I think this is the linchpin of all the things. And it's definitely
so it's like the I don't know the metaphor well enough, and I probably should as a nonfiction writer, but the whole infinite game thing, what game are you playing?
Yes.
Pong got boring for millennials real quick. We didn't, it was cool for like the Gen X borderline people. And then like, you know, we got the snake game and it was all over. But you got Brick Breaker. Like, so I'm picturing like breaking out of this Pong game that's so limited where we're like, we're going to hop over and then come back and we're going to go this way. And no, breaking out of that, once you can break through this heart of you box and then you're bouncing around, think about what happens, how satisfying it is when you get into like one of those Brick Breaker scenarios where it goes, and it's like just unlocking all of this stuff. That's what I see happening. Once you can break through this heart of you bit and really understand what's going on, now you're bouncing around in this infinite game space of meaning and permission and you. And then the rest of it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're going to clear it all out. The whole board's going to get cleared eventually. And none of it matters anymore because you've broken out into an entirely
different thing. But I'm picturing if I was like some super dope computer programmer animator person, I would like want to like take this board, like take our like slide here and like turn it at an axis and be like, look, it's 3D. Like, you know what I mean? It kind of makes you want to be like, look, it's this thing that's actually like varied and levels and you're going to have all these different things. Like, it's just, there's more than what's here. Like, it's actually so much more complex. You're so much more complex and that's good. It's good news. It's good news. Cause again, like it's all discovery and it's fun and it's, you can get playful with it. It's just, it's powerful.
I think they were probably wrapping into this like double helix thing.
Yeah, right.
Where it's the growth spiral where you're going through it. Instead of like, you know, I think it was the Office scene where they're watching the Windows icon bounce around the TV and then it hits the one corner and then everybody cheers. And I feel like that's what we're doing right now is just like bouncing around in knowledge and like watching each other. And then we're like, word counts. We did it. Everybody can go home. It's done. And like completely not even really like giving ourselves credit for all of the other work and definitely not letting ourselves hit any of these like deep meaning points.
Right.
It's not happening. So yeah, if we can either like, you know, break out and like knock all the stuff out, you know, play a different game or just see how it all wraps together. And like, you're going to have days where you like nail word count and it feels amazing. And you're going to have days where you're like, oh, the structure though, like I finally see it. And you're going to have days where none of that feels accessible at all, but you're like, you know what? It's fine. It's going to come to me because it's part of me and I just got to let it sit.
Yeah.
That is wisdom. That is the wisdom I think that we're all striving for. And it's okay that you and I don't feel like we've hit it all of the time because I think we're hitting on the heart bit. And it's just these like, it's these moments where we spiral back around to go, oh, but my performance though. And you spiral around and like face it and deal with it. And as long as you are staying in the space of like, but the heart of me though, but the heart of me though, but the heart of me though, you're going to get through it. You're not going to get stuck in the Pong loops.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting when we kind of get to this place of like, where we can just, you know, take a big deep breath. And there's a lot of hope in the fact that like, oh, all I have to do is double down on me and I will actually be better at this thing that I'm trying to do. And then doubling down on me is just like, and it's about, you know, just getting really, really present, right? Really, really present with, you know, okay, who am I? What have my experiences been? What's important to me? What am I afraid of? Like I get to name, it's not about doing it perfect. It's just permission to get present and name the truth about me, about my story, about what's interesting, you know, all of that stuff. So that hopeful feeling is just like, it allows me to take a big deep breath and then just try again
and not suffer. Right. So that was, it was so, and as the early mapping, like, you know, we still wanted to say like, remove the pain of
I
drafting.
just want it to be easy.
But like, you can't remove the pain, but you can remove the suffering. And if we're suffering, we are suffering because of ignorance. And it's a really, really deep masked ignorance, like really deep that we don't want to let go
about yourself.
Right.
And yes. And what is actually driving you and what you're actually afraid of or what you actually want and desire that you won't let yourself name because of all of the reasons. Like that's really what it gets down to.
Yep. Like, and you can, like that, once you can access that, you can give yourself permission. You can see different meaning. You can play with the craft and all the different ways that your story turns out. You can embrace whatever word counts throw up come from you,
That's how
whatever
I
word
feel
counts you
about
throw
word
up.
counts, but yeah.
I have some vomit draft, man. But you can play in that outer space more than when you get stuck in this like tiny little loop of, well, I'm inspired by this thing and I've got to like pitch it by December. And if it doesn't come through, I'm going to be ashamed. And let me try this drafting method to make it happen. And can StoryGrid help me with structure? Can you help me? Do you see the structure? Can anyone help me make this good enough? And we just like stay in this tiny, tight little track when there's this whole big area that we could be playing in. And anyway, so that is what we're going to walk through block by block. I mean, I don't know which blocks now. It's all twisty. But that's what we're going to work through on Saturday, the 25th. And I think it may show up more in the book. And I really want to do our introduction off of this section.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. I'm just so, I don't know. It's just so damn fun to get to sit here and name it and make a weird Canva slide and then like hop on a recording and like talk about it. And like, it feels useful. Like to no one else, it's useful to me, like, and I am absolutely selfishly pursuing Reluctant Drafter because that I was finally able to go, oh yeah, that's what it is. I'm right. Like,
yeah.
Right. So if we can, I don't know. It's just and really exciting
to strip the performance level out of that, where it's like, we don't have to have arrived. For so long as an editor, I didn't want to name a niche because I wanted to be an expert in it before I could help people in it. I didn't want to like offer a specific type of package because I wanted to have like, it needed to be right and it needed to have a model or it needed to have like all of these things. And all of that was performance stuff. That wasn't real. But do you see,
but it's so real and it makes so much sense.
And it holds you back.
It does. But it also like we sort of hide behind, but that's so ethical, right? That's so good of me to do it that way. Right. Like I would hide behind, like, well, I don't need any credit. Like I can just help other people. Like, I don't want to, like, no, I have things to say, like I have stories that are really, like getting to the place of like being able to just, name it and say, no, I have stories to tell. Like, I don't want to do it alone, but I definitely have stories to tell and I want you to read them and I want you to watch them.
That was the difference maker to go from to go deeper than I want my stories to be on Netflix and down to I want as many people as possible to hear my stories, and then to acknowledge the heart of the kinds of stories that you were telling. And then from there you were able to go, oh, I can do this with my clients, I can do it with my blogs, I can do it with I can do it with collaborations, I can do it. Literally everything that I am doing in the world tells the same story, and that is getting it to as many people as possible. And that's, that's what everyone will tell you is the road to the Netflixes and is the road to the like New York Times bestsellers and whatever. Like that's the road to recognition, is just continually doing the thing. And there are outliers. So there are outliers who can write the word counts, maybe not even outliers. There are people who can write the word counts. There are people who just like look like the overnight success. There are people who have the right connections, that like whatever. There are people who do not struggle with this, and that's fine. But if you struggle with it, if you don't feel like it's just happening for you and you don't know why, maybe you're just playing Pong.
Yeah. Maybe it's just reluctance, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. See you on the 25th.